The seeing is believing. Yeah. And I will say with the insulin levels, this is anecdotal, but I'm correlating insulin levels with coronary calcium scores. It's like, oh, your insulin level's up. What is your LAD, coronary calcium score?
Welcome to the Fat Emperor podcast. I'm your host, Ivor Cummins. We're supported by the Irish Heart Disease Awareness Charity, which advocates a simple CT scan to reveal your CAC score. So, know your score and take action to prevent that premature heart attack. Everything you need to know will be right here. Today we're talking to John Madany of Dillon, Montana, who runs a family practice and deploys a lot of personal knowledge around metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance and blood measurements to track that in order to help his patients be successful in resolving their metabolic disease. So great to see you, John, here in Seattle this time.
Yes, I appreciate being able to visit with you.
It's great, and we talked a couple of times before in San Diego. Always fascinating conversations, patient stories. But you, I suppose several years ago, kind of discovered insulin resistance and the importance of insulin and glucose in chronic disease. And did you do that through your own research, or it came down from the medical bodies?
One of my colleagues had me read the book by Gary Taubes, Good Calories, Bad Calories, and when I read that, it was an aha moment because it explained the futility of my work for about 20 years.
Oh, they're strong words. I guess not totally futile, but mostly apply the drug to the symptom kind of phenomena.
Right. When I say futility, I would be referring to helping people with metabolic illness instead of just treating with more and more medication to control the numbers. Now I knew how to start deprescribing.
Right, so you're not only improving their health, but you're doing it in parallel to removing medications, which is that's just a fantastic combination, obviously.
Oh, yeah, it was very satisfying. I didn't know there was a term, deprescribing, but having to overcome the inertia of pulling back medication was unique, and that was very satisfying because this was for patients that I've known for years. So it's like, now I've got an answer, how we can stop this endless progression of it's a new year, it's a new drug.
Right, and that's reminiscent of Dr. David Unwin's story in the UK, where he was close to retirement, discovered what you discovered, and suddenly realized he enjoyed his role, his vocation, his job, because now he could actually intervene, help people, and deprescribe medications for the first time in his career, a 40-year career.
Right, so I kind of say now I found the best retirement plan is enjoying your work.
Yeah, it's huge. If you can make your hobby your job, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing you have fantastic patient stories, and we'll get into some of those, but you see quite a lot of people, even though America has enormous obesity issues, you'd see quite a lot of people who are TOFI or not so obese outside, appear healthy, and yet their blood markers clearly show you, with your expertise, that they're at really high risk, just like an obese person.
Yeah, and come to think of it, I'm one of a severe TOFI in that I had fatty liver disease diagnosed by biopsy. The liver enzymes were that bad. And the response I got was, oh, you don't have hepatitis C, B, or hemochromatosis. And I was like, okay. And then over time I've learned that it's a fructose disease, which is easily explained by my habit of minimal alcohol consumption and vast amounts of fructose consumption from age 5.
Oh, so you've had a lifetime really of, most of your life until a few years ago, of eating high sugar diet.
Yeah, and I was also a very diligent low fat dieter. So this all changed. It was very life-changing personally, and it helps me empathize with patients. But I don't practice based on what I did for me necessarily is the science of it.
Right, it is completely science-based. And even though Gary Taubes' book tipped you off to the enormity of insulin and glucose dynamics and their connection to chronic disease, you really then, of course, took that as a springboard to go and research yourself, I think, with your access to the medical literature.
Yeah, being that I can go to the National Library of Medicine online, PubMed, and type in insulin and a chronic disease and it just tumbles out of the computer. It's almost to the point where you don't have to you can just do a new search if you want to show somebody an example. Like I work with medical students and it's like, hey, watch this, insulin, this, boom, here's a paper. I've never read this before, but it's slam dunk.
Yeah, and myriad papers on any. I used to say that years ago as well. I mean, put in Google insulin resistance or hyperinsulinemia and the chronic disease of your choice, right, modern disease, and you're going to get a ton of hits.
And it's physiologic. It's not, we're not talking about correlation. We're talking about mechanism.
Yeah, and pretty much validated. Nothing is 100% proven in any field, but this is right up at the top.
And when you start implementing it and you say, I think that your edema in your legs is from high insulin, and the insulin level drops and the ankles appear, what can you say? And now you're on a less blood pressure medication using 1/6 the amount of insulin, and it's like, oh, we're onto something here.
Yeah, John, and you mentioned earlier actually this morning when we were chatting that people who come in with high or highish insulin, you nearly always now find another sign also. Rarely do you find high insulin isolated. You'll see hypertension with it, or you might see some central obesity, something else.
Exactly. I haven't found somebody with high insulin that I didn't suspect it. And I should say that I've been able to start with this work was no insulin levels, using Richard Bernstein's book as a guide to what foods stimulate insulin, and that's what I kind of started with, making up recommendations based on what foods don't trigger insulin release. And then the technology is advanced. Then comes the Dexcom, which I wore for a month total myself. Now we have the Freestyle Libre, where I'm just prescribing that to anybody who will take one, because it's such an eye-opener to see what foods do. The classic one now is skim milk and cornflakes, and it'll drop your jaw what it's doing to your insulin. And then within our hospital, I'm very fortunate that our hospital has high-tech equipment where we can get an insulin level within hours. So it can, in a sense, get a stat insulin level, a beta-hydroxybutyrate, the ketone level. Using the Freestyle Libre, you can put that together and you can see so much that if the lab results came in different days, it'd be hard to put it together. But when a patient's sitting in front of you with the results all came in today, and we can talk about what you did yesterday, the seeing is believing. Yeah. And I will say with the insulin levels, this is anecdotal, but I'm correlating insulin levels with coronary calcium scores. It's like, oh, your insulin level's up. What is your LAD, coronary calcium score? And it seems like there's a relationship.
Right, and actually in the literature, there are limited papers on insulin. There are many papers on insulin and future heart disease and future diabetes, of course, but there's relatively limited ones that have coronary calcium. Yeah. So that's really interesting, and I'm hearing more. It's very heartening. I obviously work on behalf of Irish Heart Disease Awareness and David Bobbitt, and our main goal is to get information out in the calcification scan to save the middle risk, especially non-obese, non-smokers. Give them a heads up. But to your point, I'm hearing more and more doctors coming back now all over the world at conferences, emails, all beginning to do calcification scans when they actually realize the huge value of them. So you've been...
Thanks for tuning in, guys. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see my subscribe button in the middle of the screen, a free viewing of the Widowmaker movie on the far right, and myself and Dr. Gerber's book, Eat Rich, Live Long, on the left.